With no fees or minimums, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than deciding to listen to another episode of your favorite podcast. And with no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, we know you personalize your entire day. That's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary. Hi, Crime Junkies, and happy Crime Junkie Thursday. I love this new little summer thing we have going. I hope you do too. Well, today, let me give you the spiel just one more time. Mondays are Crime Junkie days, but for the rest of the summer, we wanted to celebrate 5 years of the Crime Junkie fan club by celebrating you, our fans. And to do that, we wanted to release some fan club vault episodes to you. We've been making bonus episodes almost as long as we've been making wide release episodes. And every single month in the fan club, we do one full-length episode, one mini episode, and one piece of bonus content. And you might ask, what does bonus content mean? Well, today, I'm going to show you. Now, I don't need to tell you that I'm obsessed with unsolved mysteries, right? Like, that's a universal thing built into the DNA of all crime junkies, I feel like. I love me some Robert Stack, and I love me the new Netflix reboot. So much so that back when the first season of the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries came out, Britt and I did a recap-type episode about the whole series, case by case. And I thought, what better time to share this bonus content with you because, PSA, a new season of Unsolved Mysteries is coming out on Netflix at the end of this month. So this is your time to catch up. Listen to us chat about Season 1, and if you enjoy it, watch the new season of Unsolved Mysteries, join the fan club, and come listen to us talk about the new season. If you sign up for the fan club directly through our website, you can use code FREESUMMER, and new members get to join whatever tier you want for free for the rest of July and all of August. All right, so here you go. Here is your Unlocked Vault episode. Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm your host, Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Britt. And personally, I am incredibly offended that you are not also the host of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. You are right here. You don't have time, but you could make time.
Listen, I can't tell you how many times I told Netflix, I have a trench coat. Like, if that's what you're waiting for.
Exactly.
And it's not like they found someone better. There was no host. So that's actually part of what I want to talk about. We want to give you guys the Unsolved Mysteries recap, Crime Junkie style. You're watching it. We're talking about it. You're talking about it. Let's all talk about it together. So, Britt, what I'm thinking is I kind of want to just get your thoughts on the series as a whole first, and then we can kind of talk about each episode.
So, to be fair, I was way more of America's Most Wanted person than an Unsolved Mysteries person. So I was going in a little bit maybe less biased than someone like a diehard like you.
Okay.
But the lack of a narrator was super jarring for me.
Okay, right?
And, like, obviously, no one could ever hold up to the late, great Robert Stack.
But no, I mean, they tried to replace him. It did not work. So they had to bring him back.
Right. But, like, there's still, like, no one kind of, like, telling the spooky story, which is half of the, like, I hate to say fun, but, like, half of the allure, maybe of the episodes is someone kind of, like, leaving you on those, like, cliffhangers. And maybe it's also like a little bit of like millennial bias. I miss the commercial breaks where you're like,
oh, I didn't even think about that.
And then like your local grocer is like, hey, we have bananas on sale this week. Like I kind of miss like the nostalgia factor of having like a solid commercial break. I mean, even in like shows from a few years ago that are on Netflix, they still have those kind of like commercial break moments. You just don't get the commercials. And this felt way more stylized towards Netflix, which obviously they produced it. I get that. But the nostalgic in me, like, I really wanted some of those like gaspy moments where I could run, get a Capri Sun before it started back up again.
So I actually kind of agree with you. Like, I mean, I grew up on Unsolved Mysteries, so I have that like appreciation and miss the nostalgia of it. But I definitely was an America's Most Wanted girl. I've said it 1,000 times. John Walsh was my boyfriend. We spent every Saturday night together. But I don't know. Maybe this has always been big. I'm about to say something that might sound silly, but like I feel like nostalgia is very in right now, and it might always be. But I'm just like finally at an age where like I have something to be nostalgic about, and I think. Here's my like quick hot take on Unsolved Mysteries. If you would have called it anything else,
I would have loved it.
I would have given it an 11 out of 10. It was wonderfully produced. The stories were super compelling, so well told. Loved like the compassion for the victims and the families. And really, I mean, Unsolved Mysteries has always been about trying to solve cases. I think I read somewhere that of all of the cases they've covered, they've actually helped solve like 260 of them. I love the mission of Unsolved Mysteries. So 11 out of 10 if you would have called it just like Netflix's Mysteries. However, what I was waiting for, what I was wanting was that kind of, the same thing, same appreciation, same storytelling, but that like cheeky, campy vibe that it had is what I miss so much. To your point, having that narrator to walk you through the story and tell you about the cases and having Robert Stack ask you, like, maybe you can solve a mystery.
Well, and again, like coming back to what you said, like I appreciate hearing the stories of people involved or people close to the case or, the victim's family and friends. I appreciate them maybe having like a louder voice or a more prominent voice in the episode. That was amazing. And that was something that maybe we didn't get as much of in like the old school one.
But it's a double-edged sword, right? Because
exactly.
We don't get that because we have one case per episode, whereas part of what I missed about Unsolved Mysteries is they could take a case that no one else could cover because there wasn't an hour of content. So they would do like 3 cases per episode. And I think that's what made it so great. And I think that's why, so many podcasts still use Unsolved Mysteries to even talk about the crime cases we're talking about now, because Unsolved Mysteries for a lot of cases
were the only ones talking about it.
Exactly. Because again, they were like, okay, we just need to fill 10 minutes of content, not an entire like 40 minutes of content with each story.
The episodes were almost told in like vignette style. So you had multiple stories within one 43-minute television episode. Was there a lot to go off of? No, but that's why Unsolved Mysteries could cover it, like you said.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit, not concerned isn't even the right word. Maybe it is. I'm a little bit concerned that as we continue to go on, it's still going to just be these bigger cases. Now, granted, most of the ones from this first batch of episodes they put out were fairly unknown. So if they can keep that up, I think that's really awesome. Because again, that's like what I loved about it is you could tune into Unsolved Mysteries and hear a case that you had never heard about, and it just like blew your mind. But these cases, I mean, true to that, they did blow my mind. So I think we should kind of run through the 6 episodes that they did. Maybe we'll call it Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
And for the 11 out of 10, how much I loved it, I want to talk about the episodes and all the things that I loved about them and talk about theories. So, we split up the episodes. I'm going to do 1 through 3. You're going to do 4 through 6. Let's dive in. So like I said, part of what I want to do with our review is to give you a quick overview of the cases, let you know if there has been any updates, what the internet is going crazy over, because new theories have emerged in some of these stories already. But we are going to be skipping over episode 1, both because we already did a full-length episode on this case, but also because certain parties that were mentioned during our episode on Ray Rivera sent us a letter through their lawyers threatening legal action because they believe that our episode suggested that they may have had something to do with Ray's death. So, in an effort to stay safe and to be on the up and up, we aren't going to talk about this case until our lawyers have worked with theirs to sort this out. And I know that isn't a lot, but that is really all I can say about that.
Okay, so episode 2.
on to episode 2. So in episode 2, which was titled 13 Minutes, we learn about a woman named Patrice who went missing. And again, we've all seen it, but I'll just give you like a short recap and then we can kind of talk about the things that stood out to us. So Patrice drops her son off at school, goes to work. She works at a hair salon, and literally in a 13-minute window, hence the name of the episode, she goes straight up missing.
Which, right off the bat, blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot. I feel like it's more common than we even believe, where like these things happen in almost these unbelievable windows of time.
Impossible, yeah.
Yeah. So when police get there, once they realize she's missing, something's amiss, they realize that money had been taken from the register, but not from her purse, which did have cash in it. But the purse was actually rifled through. And this is something that I got stuck on for a long time. Like, if you're there to steal the money, steal all the money. No?
Right. Like, it's a robbery for a reason.
But is it? Like, and that's the big thing is what was the motive for this crime? And that's something that to this day, I don't think the public really has an answer to. One of the things that I thought was super interesting is, you know, they make a big deal in the episode about where her car was parked. So normally she like backed in, she was right on the side of the building. But the day that she goes missing, her car is like kind of in front of the building. So the one thought I had is maybe they're rifling through her purse to get the keys. Again, I don't know if you're going to bother to take the register money. I don't know why you don't take the purse money, but maybe they were looking for the keys.
Yeah, or even like the purse in general, like credit cards, cash, whatever's in there. Like, why not just like throw it over your shoulder and take it along?
Yeah, and that is to me like what makes this look like a staged robbery. Because again, I'll just take everything out of the cash register and all I need are the keys. And that's what this person leaves with. So she's missing. And do you want to talk about Rob?
I mean, where to start, honestly?
I mean, we should start by saying this dude probably should have passed on doing the documentary, because even though police have openly said, like, he has an alibi, it seems to check out.
So sketch.
We're looking at other possibilities. Yeah, he looked so bad. And there were like a couple of quotes of his that I literally like had to rewind and write down because I was just so like taken aback by them. Mm-hmm. Like there's one time when, you know, they're talking about her being missing and people are like, you know, they didn't have a great relationship. Pistol is her son. Pistol saying, yeah, they fought all the time. But when Rob is asked about this by producers, he basically says like, there's no point in arguing. All that does is drive divisions in relationships. Like,
okay.
Dude, what? Have you, like, anyone who's ever been married ever is like, no, you just, like, sometimes you fight. Like, and to me, that's the natural answer is like, yeah, we, like, fought about random stuff and, you know, things.
Yeah, don't get me started about, like, loading the dishwasher. It's like,
you and Justin are still fighting about that.
We don't fight about it. We just cannot be in the kitchen when the other one is doing it. That's it. That's like,
because you've learned that if you do it together, it drives a division in your relationship.
I mean, basically, that's probably like a point in like Rob's section. But like, we fight about dumb things all the time.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is like when I asked you about you and Justin fighting, you had something immediately that came to your mind. One of the other things that stood out to me is when Pistol is also talking about how, you know, his mom was talking about divorce a couple of weeks before she went missing, and these issues again and again. It's posed to Rob, all of this, and he's like, this is new information. I never knew she was interested in divorce, which might be true. Like, if someone is looking to leave someone, you don't necessarily, like, give them a heads up. I don't know.
Right.
But one thing he said is, quote, sometimes there were issues, but I don't remember the issues.
Oh, no, honey, I remember every issue.
Yeah, and you know, you remember everything always. But even like in any relationship, especially like when someone were to go missing, like I would just think back to every fight I had with Eric and be like, that it didn't matter. Like, why are we even wasting our time? To me, it seems like something you would kind of fester on, and you would at least remember, again, we could not get over the dishwasher. No, I don't want to kill Justin over the dishwasher, but my God, I know we thought about it.
But it was like a thing that's like been in our relationship for, you know, 8 years or whatever.
Yeah. And so this is something that starts to come out in the documentary is this division, this disgruntled relationship between Pistol and Rob. And I, at first, you know, when you start, I'm thinking that Rob's going to like defend himself. And he just is straight up like, basically, no, like I hated that kid. He was awful. He was terrible. just says horrible things about him. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the kid's mom is going missing. And this is the part that stuck out to me like crazy, is within 24 hours after Patrice goes missing, he changes all of the locks in the home.
It kind of reminds me of like when kids go missing and like the parents never move away. Like you never, like you always want to be that home base for the person that you love who went missing, you know? Like,
yeah,
you don't change your phone number. You don't change your cell phone number. You don't change your address. Like you stay in this home, even though, you know, the area that you're in is only going to remind you of your loss. Like you never want to discount the idea that like if they come back, I will still be exactly where they left me.
And I'm sure if you were to like pose that to him, he would say, well, she could just knock on the door. Like I'd be right there, whatever, I'm just trying to like play devil's advocate, but I under no circumstances understand that happening within 24 hours. Like you don't know where she is. Maybe she did just up and walk away. Maybe she left with a friend. 24 hours and you're like changing the locks on your home? And
it's incredibly too soon in my unprofessional opinion.
Well, and it's a home that you share with her son, your stepson. And like the amount of like cruelty I feel like I could feel when Rob was talking about this and he was just like, listen, like good riddance, like someone else can take care of him. Basically, like I didn't want to have to be looking over my shoulder and worrying about this kid too. I had enough going on. Don't you think he had enough going on? His mom is missing. He never let him come in and get his stuff. Like, again, I just was like, is this guy hearing himself? I don't know if he's a narcissist. I don't know what it is, but like he says the things out loud and clearly thinks that they're like super reasonable, whereas everyone else hears them and is like, what is wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
So she's missing for literally years. No one knows where she is.
No one has contact with her.
Rob and Pistol have like almost no contact with each other. Pistol goes to live with his biological dad. But eventually, after a few years, Patrice's remains are located in a wooded area not too far from where she was abducted. It's kind of interesting. The woods that Patrice was found in, she was not the only person to be found in those woods.
What?
Yeah, so prior to her case, there was a case of a young boy. He was like 11. His name was Levi. And he was abducted like in 97 after like riding a bike from one friend's house to another, disappeared, and he ended up being found in those woods and he was shot, I believe, to death. And then Patrice is 2004. And then in 2008, there is the case of this woman named Meredith Emerson. And she actually is someone they like briefly brought up in the episode because one of the suspects in Patrice's case is Gary Hilton. And he is like for sure convicted of murdering Meredith, who were found in the same woods. So I think that's one of the reasons they're like kind of connecting the cases. Yeah. And if you guys want to hear an entire episode on Meredith and Gary Hilton, that's actually one of the first episodes we did in our new series, Park Predator. So I highly recommend it. It might give you a little more insight into this guy who was a suspect and, you know, just kind of into the area at the time. Because it's hard to tell if any of these are connected, not knowing how Patrice died. But they're far enough away that I think it's unlikely. This might be like the Leakin Park of this area. It just like seems that, again, over the course of a few years, like multiple bodies have popped up there. Now, we don't know how she died. They're keeping that information like for law enforcement only. I assume to like rule out people who might confess or whatever.
Right.
But they did make a huge point in the Unsolved Mysteries segment of noting that her ring wasn't found. Like this is the piece of evidence that they're looking for. It was found nowhere on the floor of the woods, which doesn't mean it wasn't there. It wasn't picked up. It wasn't taken away. It's still there. You know, who knows?
Right.
But now that the ring is gone, is robbery back on the table as a possible motive?
I mean, but that's the only thing. I don't know.
Yeah, neither do I. And again, was it like a personal thing that someone wanted to take it? Was it a money thing? Was it, again, to try and throw off the scent of something in a robbery? It was weird. It's something that everyone is looking for, I assume, in pawn shops, in people's homes, whatever. But this is like the standout piece of evidence that Unsolved Mysteries released. But after we find out that Patrice is dead, again, we get some weird comments from Rob, who basically just says, maybe they're not that weird, but he says, I have no comment for people who think I did it. So he doesn't really like defend himself. He's just, which I know you're tired of me defending Rob, but I kind of get at some point because it's like,
I've said everything I can say. I'm not going to say anything else. Like, believe me or don't.
Yeah, like put up or shut up kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just as I'm about to defend Rob, it got weirder. His like last farewell. Do you want to talk? Like, what was that?
That's all I have to say, I think.
Yeah, so for anyone listening who hasn't seen it, or maybe it was days ago and you can't remember, so Rob's last farewell is he asked the person who worked at the funeral home to take all of Patrice's bones and lay them out and like basically reassemble her so that he could come and say goodbye. And what he says is, quote, reassemble her, lay her out for me. And when they do that, they like give him a moment alone and he picks up her skull and just like carries it around with him for a while is what he says.
Like, which is what he says, which is like honestly, one of the wildest things of this episode because he flat out says it.
Oh, is it the wildest thing? Because, well, first of all, before I go to the next bananas thing he did is he had a line at the end of that where he says, you know, he kisses her goodbye. He puts her skull back with her body. And he says, quote, that's the last time I saw Patrice anywhere near intact, end quote. I rewound this twice. What a weird thing to say. That's the last time I saw her intact.
It really is. Like, what does it mean? Why is he saying it? Why is he like saying it out loud to like on a mic? Like, there are so many questions.
Intact? What did you? When did you ever see her not intact? Like, that's my question. And again, we don't know how she died. I don't know if she was ever.
Like the last time I saw her intact, did you see her unintact later? Like,
So he has her cremated. He gets her home. And then he says that he sleeps with her ashes like she was his teddy bear.
It just makes my stomach turn a little bit.
Again, I don't know what it's like to lose a spouse. I don't know the kind of grieving, but like you just walked around with her skull. Now you got like a Build-A-Bear of ashes.
That's a
it's
phrase.
Weird. Yeah. One that I never thought I'd have to say.
Yeah. There's just so many questions as like his reasoning even for some of these things. Even, again, coming back to defend him, even if he had nothing to do with anything, this is all.
Well, we said this all the time, right? I mean, police are saying he has an alibi. Like, we're really not looking at him anymore. I don't feel like I heard the words like we've totally cleared him, but what they said was like it would be really improbable that he could do it. So, I mean, if we're going off what police say, like, I don't think he has anything to do with it. But this kind of shows you, it reinforces, like, how many episodes have we done on, like, bad husbands? And we've said before, being a bad husband, being, like, a kind of a gross guy does not make you a murderer.
Well, and on top of that, like, coming back to another thing that we say a lot, too, like, you never know how you're going to respond to the loss of someone close to you, if and when that happens.
Yeah, and here was something I found interesting, though, because, again, he says he's sleeping with these ashes like a teddy bear, but when the producers ask to actually, like, see them, granted, it's been years, I'm sure he doesn't sleep with them anymore, but he, like, has to go to his hall closet and is like, oh, she should be in here, and is, like, digging around, and, like, there's this box on the floor that looks all beaten up and tattered, and he even tries to point up, like, oh, this is how beaten up it looks, and you can tell that whatever.
You know, it's old and it's been here for ages, whatever.
Yeah, but he pulls out this box from within the box. It looks more like it was made out of plastic or wood or something. It's black. So out of this cardboard box, he pulls out this other thing that looks completely pristine. And to get her ashes out, he actually, like, in front of camera has to, like, cut open that black box.
Which is wild in the moment.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, so you've had these for years and years and years, and not that you need to look at them. But for someone who carried around the skull and was sleeping with them, I find that very surprising.
You would kind of expect it to be, you know, like on an urn, on a shelf, on a mantle, somewhere displayed.
Not at the bottom of the closet floor. And that's what's so upsetting to me is because he clearly, you know, whatever he did with them before, however he treasured them before, now they're sitting on the floor in his hall closet. And Pistol has said, like, he won't like share them with him. He's never been able to see his mom's remains. He's literally like getting joy out of keeping it from her son, which he even kind of alludes to when he's like doing an interview. And
it's kind of like a spiteful thing for him.
It's so bizarre. It is so bizarre. But again, police have said he has an alibi that seems almost irrefutable to break. He had a receipt, right? Like a timestamped receipt from getting gas, and then some kind of like automated thing at his work when he like comes in and out. Now, the thing I don't know that I tried to look up but couldn't find is he on camera? Were they able to verify that it was him who got these receipts and who was driving the car that went through? I don't know the answers to that. But again, all we can do is trust that police did their due diligence when they investigated him. And we cannot legally say anything beyond that. Like, we have to hope that they did a good job. Now, one of the pieces of evidence, like something specific that I had looked for over and over, is in the episode, they kept talking about Patrice's car, how it used to normally on any other day that she worked, it would be like backed in on the side of the building right by the side door.
Right.
So on the day she goes missing, it's like in front of the building. And there were witnesses that came forward that said they saw this like blue sedan, and they all think it's like a different type of sedan. And maybe there were people, maybe they weren't, maybe it was a man, maybe it was a woman, whatever. Whoever it is, they think this blue car could be the key. Do you know how hard I tried to find out what kind of car Rob drove at the time Patrice went missing?
I feel like that's why we're recording this episode today and not 4 days ago.
Yeah, but I can't. I don't know. I mean, I honestly would like anyone in her life, because one of the witnesses said no one said they saw a man matching Rob's description, to be completely clear.
Right.
They see like a long-haired, one person says it's a man, one person says it's a woman, but it actually matches Patrice's description. And then like an older woman, which they gave no explanation for who that older woman could possibly be. I mean, again, maybe this car isn't related at all, but I can't think of a scenario in my mind, blue car totally aside, where the position of her car makes a ton of sense, unless they like whoever came had to have come on foot, used her car to take her away somewhere, and then came back and just dropped the car off. But like, why even bother?
In like a completely different area and setting.
Well, yeah, I can't think of a scenario that makes a lot of sense. Like, I think some people had brought up like, oh, maybe she was in a hurry or maybe she was coming back. And I'm like, I don't think there's a scenario where Patrice was driving. Do you?
No, I don't think so either. It just seems completely unlikely for that to be the scenario. But I mean, this is going to be a theme in like every single episode we cover, but like there's so many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It's hard to say yes or no either way, you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, unsolved mysteries. We don't know why her car was parked there. We don't know who was in the blue car, if the blue car is relevant. We have no idea what happened to her in those 13 minutes and beyond that day. We have no suspects, no persons of interest, just a lot of unanswered questions. Alrighty, episode 3. Okay, so when I started this, I knew nothing about this case.
Neither did I.
And I did not see this coming. Based on the title of the episode, I literally was expecting like some kind of crazy, bloody massacre of an entire family.
Yeah, and like I don't do well with those sort of like spooky things. So I was like bracing myself hardcore.
Yeah, so we like open in this cute little French town. By the way, mad hard to take notes when also reading subtitles. And again, I knew like nothing going in. And I'm like, again, this is like a whole family. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, no, this is a straight up Robert Fisher situation, except this dude couldn't even be bothered to spare the dogs. And before he like up and left.
Yeah. So
basically what we find out is the house just goes like quiet, shutters are closed. The family gets all these weird letters from the parents who are like, hey, we're spies in the DEA, so we're not going to be here anymore. The kids' schools all get letters that are like, hey, we're in Australia. And they put a note on the door. It's like, hey, just don't deliver mail. We're not here right now, which buys so much time.
Yeah.
And police are coming back day after day because there's this nosy neighbor, thank God for nosy neighbors, who's like, something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. So they finally discover the mom and her 4 kids and their 2 dogs buried underneath the house. And it's almost like a crawl space, kind of like underneath a porch or something is like the best way I can describe it if you haven't seen it.
Like for like Midwesterners, maybe like kind of like a Michigan basement, but even a little bit different because it's under a porch instead of the building.
Yeah, like, I mean, I would have to crawl on my hands and knees, I think, to like go under there. Like nobody, even if you were short, it's not like you can just stand up and walk and go in. But they find all 5 people and the dogs like wrapped in trash bags and buried in the ground. But as they're uncovering all of these bodies, guess whose body isn't there?
Dad's.
Dad. Yeah. And it becomes pretty clear pretty quick that he's on his own. And he had inherited this rifle from his father when his father passed away. And we kind of learned that his whole facade of like who he was, who he put off to everyone, who his kids like thought they were, is all kind of a lie. Like he was almost in financial ruin and was going to be discovered, which is what we see so many times,
like over and over again. And I understand like situations are dire, but God, why kill your family because of it? I cannot get past it.
And it's all like with these family annihilators, it's all like the psychology of it, right? Like it's, part of them thinks that they're saving their family this shame or something, or it could really be, I mean, I think it's different for each person. Some people think that they're saving family shame. Some people, it's all about their own shame and they don't want
almost fixing the problem by making it disappear.
Yeah, like, okay, I don't have to answer to my family because my family isn't here anymore.
Right.
One thing that I had a hard time picking up from the documentary is I really couldn't tell where his friends like stood on the matter, because at the beginning of the episode, I feel like they spent a lot of time being like, I knew him. He couldn't have done this. He had a bad back. There's no way he could have like gone under that, what we're calling a Michigan basement and buried them. Like there's just no way.
But then they kind of waffle a bit.
Yeah. But yeah. And then towards the end of the episode, like you can tell it's a separate interview. They're like, I just can't believe it. This is so hard to believe. So they almost have come to the realization that, listen, this is real.
Right.
And it's hard to argue with the evidence because he is seen after his family dies and, they finally realize what's going on. He is seen on camera. He's using his credit card. He's buying dinner. He's buying gas. He's at a hotel. They catch him on hotel footage, like parking and then just kind of like walking off into the vast open. But I have to think that was so planned.
I mean, in my opinion, it almost has to be. And I think we talked about this even in, Robert Fisher. Like you said, a really good example is like, you don't just do this without knowing your next like 3 steps.
Yeah. And they said it, I think, in the episode, and I think it's something we've talked about too, and we did a little research on family annihilators, is that often family annihilators will take their own life as well. Or like in the case of Robert Fisher, like he went on the run, but he was like really trying to hide. It literally felt like this guy was leaving breadcrumbs almost. Like, I want you to know where I'm going, but he wasn't found. So was it specifically to lead them down the wrong path? Now, what I found interesting is I was reading in Newsweek, there was this question posed on Reddit, and it said, quote, "A man in his 50s with supposedly a bad back moving 4 dead bodies worth of dead weight and 2 dogs outside, placing them in trash bags and burying them the way that he did is close to impossible to do alone. Ever try moving a 50-pound bag of wet leaves or grass into a trash bin? And on top of that, he did it all over the course of a night, minus 1 sun." End quote. So this kind of poses the question of, was there another person?
Right. Like, was he acting alone? And like, to answer this Reddit user's question, I just had to move my 34-pound daughter from the floor to her bed in a span of 3 feet at the age of 31. Very difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, you have 4 almost adult-sized teenagers and some in their 20s.
And you aren't, I mean, not that I'm spry by any means, but you have a back injury, like, impossible.
Yeah, and so to have it all done in one night seems a little bit improbable to do alone. But I also found in this same article, so again, this is on Reddit, take it with a grain of salt. Apparently there are a few users that have been, quote, discussing alleged sightings of the deceased family members after the dates that they were believed to have been killed.
What?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue to read. So, quote, one person who claims to have found a French blog posted by Xavier's family speculates up to 9 people saw Ange, the wife, alive after the date police said that she was killed. Some of these people state they spoke to her and she was normal. Some say a bit agitated. She was seen walking the dog after the 4th April and was also seen with Anne and Bertrand, the 2 youngest kids. End quote. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I don't know what any of that means, and I can't verify a French blog. So again, Reddit, grain of salt. But was this some sort of like, I don't even know what they're implying, some sort of like family suicide pact, or maybe the mom helped them or him, or again, I don't know what this means. It just is saying that maybe the timeline isn't what we thought it was. Maybe there is someone else, whether that's a family member, whether that's an outside person. Because one of the other things I can't get over is the fact that they said there was no blood. How is every person killed execution style, but there is no blood?
Yeah, it just seems not only unlikely, but impossible.
Mm-hmm. In this same Newsweek article that I had, I found it super interesting because they had said that specifically the bullets were found inside their bodies, meaning that they didn't leave, but there was an exit wound. So what that is suggesting is that the bullets would have had to exit their skulls, but hit something and bounce back in. So in this article, they theorized, well, what if they were killed in a bathtub? And that would explain the no blood. It would explain the exit wounds, but the bullets still being inside of them.
Lodged in them, right.
But what it doesn't explain to me, and I guess we don't know the levels of sleeping pills in their system, but it doesn't explain this isn't, you didn't just kill one person or even 2 little kids. How do you get 5 adults in I guess one of them was gone. So 4 adults in a bathtub, presumably one at a time, and not wake anyone up, not startle anyone. There's no, I just...
Well, and again, coming back to the fact that this is a crawl space Michigan basement situation, the bathtub would have at least been on the main floor above that, if not, a second floor. I don't remember the outlay of the building, but again, like you said, one at a time in the bathtub, bang, take them down at least 1 flight of stairs, in theory, to this crawl space, and then do it all over again with no one stopping you. And
well, even if you made it again, there's a silencer, I guess, but even if you killed them in the tub, cleaned up the blood, moved them out, moved the next person in the tub, it's still, I mean, you can
and
do...
no blood, and no blood trail. If you shoot them in the tub, yes, the majority of the blood is going to end up in the tub that you can rinse and clean out. But you have to move them then.
But yeah, you'd almost have to wait for them to bleed out in there.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. Again, unsolved mysteries. We don't know. There's been no sightings of him, no confirmed sightings. One of the things I thought was super interesting was the fact that he told his one son he could go back to university, and then he called him back. So I had gone to this training with this guy named Richard Walter, who is this world-renowned crime assessment
hero.
Oh my gosh, he is. And I remember one thing specifically I learned from him about family annihilators. And he said that often what you'll see is a family annihilator, if they have a firstborn son, they have a very hard time committing the act, and they still will, but often you'll see that you'll see
more communication or more connection or more information.
Well, I'm saying not even that. No, just the carnage is totally toned down. So whereas they might totally bludgeon their wife or their daughters or even younger sons, the amount of damage to the body, specifically to the face, you will see will be far, far less, because they see that firstborn son as an image of them. Right. And so when I heard this whole thing, I kind of wondered if he sent Thomas off to university because he was trying to spare him, but then after everything was done, he realized he couldn't.
Right.
Or even it was just the one that he was dreading the most, or he never wanted Thomas to wake up.
He was kind of putting it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy. He's still on France's most wanted men list. No one has seen him. No one knows where he could be. People have talked about Latin America. People have talked about Europe. Who only knows? This guy could blend in anywhere. He could be anyone.
Okay, so episode 4 is the death of Alonzo Brooks. And basically on April 4th of 2004, Alonzo goes to this farm party with some friends about 50 miles away from his home in Garner, Kansas. And like, as a farm kid, like, I totally get exactly what kind of party this was. It was in this abandoned house in this tiny town called Lacine, Kansas. And he was one of the older guys there. He was like 23. And on top of that, he was also the only person of color, which will come up later. And he went to this party with one of his friends. That friend went to get some supplies, got lost, and basically was like, I'm going to go home. Just ride home with one of our other friends and whatever. But Alonzo never made it home after the party. And the next morning, his friends call his mom. It's like, hey, is Zoe there? Which Zoe as a nickname just like broke my heart because it's so cute.
I know.
Hey, is Zoe there? And his mom was like, well, he should be. She checks his room. He's not there. She checks the basement. He's not there. And then like this huge network of friends who were at the party, who weren't at the party, just people who knew Alonzo, calling each other, being like, hey, where is he? Have you seen him? Have you heard from him? Anything? And there's nothing. Even the people who were at the party after the friend who took Alonzo there, like, they were like, well, we thought he left before us. We thought he was going to go home with someone else. Like, no one actually knew, like, when or how Alonzo left this sort of barn party.
And that's, like, the thing that stood out to me the most is I was like, crime junkie life rule. There's a reason this is a rule. Like, you come together, you leave together. Because I understand, like, I heard all of them say, like, I got stuck somewhere, or I got lost, or I was going to leave early, and he said he had a ride, and I get it. Like, but once you get passed off so many times, like, no one is looking out for anyone at that point.
Right. And I think we talk about this a little bit in some other episodes, but, that's kind of like, at least to me, like a girl code. Like, you do not let your friend walk home by yourself. You do not let your friend walk to her car by yourself. And I feel like it's getting more prevalent now across the board between like genders and stuff. But like in 2004, like especially in Kansas, in the middle of the Midwest, like they're in the middle of nowhere, and guys are tough guys. Like, they don't need someone to make sure they're going to get home.
That's you're saying that's the perception.
That's the perception. Yeah. Like, as someone who grew up in a similar area, a little bit younger, but with the same sort of like attitude of people, like, I totally get that. Like,
yeah,
it would be very surprising if like one of the guys I grew up with would be like, are you gonna text me when you get home, to another guy? Like, that would never happen in this time frame, in this area, in this mindset. So I don't want to fault his friends too much, because I think that's just where they were in that moment. And based on this episode, they've drastically changed their mindset and their feelings on that sort of situation. So they all kind of band together, go back out to this house where they had this party, and they start looking for him. And they don't find him, but on the property where the party was, they found one of his boots. And within walking distance across the street, they found another boot that belonged to him, along with his hat. And at this point, Alonzo's mom is like up to 11. She calls law enforcement, and she's like, my son is missing. What next? Like, what can you do? What do we need to do? Etc. And they're like, oh, you need to wait like 48 hours. Like, we've heard a million times. And she's like, I'm sorry, no.
I know.
I'm filing a missing persons report right now, so you're going to take it. And I love that about her. She just fights from the very beginning.
Yeah, she's sassy. I like her.
Oh, she's like my favorite person, 100%. So law enforcement like goes out, they search for him, they bring out, tracking dogs and helicopters, and even really early on, the FBI gets involved. And there was even a dive team who went through a sort of creek that ran through the property, and they find nothing. And even a ton of people get interviewed, but no one knows anything. Like, people from the party, they're all just like, I don't know. And law enforcement is basically like, well, he must have just gotten drunk and started walking home. But at this point, we know that Zoe doesn't have any shoes, because we found his shoes on the properties. And on top of that, he had recently messed up his ankle and had like a pretty significant limp. And Ashley, you know me, I mess up my ankles constantly. And I personally cannot imagine like walking any considerable length of like, I'm just going to go home 50 miles away on my bum ankle without shoes.
No, not happening. No.
No, like you've seen me, I can barely make it through an airport sometimes. So all that happened, again, like at the beginning of April, it was like April 4th, 2004. And this entire time, his family is like, can we help? Can we do anything? And law enforcement is like, no, we're fine. Like, we're doing everything possible. But finally, on May 1st, they're like, okay, fine. You guys can go out and search this property. But it's definitely more of like we've already looked. I don't know what you're going to find. Like, we've been there. We've been through everything. Like,
but did they, though?
Well, and that's kind of the question. Is like, in my opinion, in the documentary, they're like, yes, like, we pulled out all the stops to, like, make sure we checked everything. But the family was like, okay, but you didn't find him. But the thing is, like, his family finds him right off the bat and in the creek, just, like, steps away from where the party was. And so there's this whole debate on, like, how thorough was the law enforcement search? Like, yes, we know there were, like, dogs and helicopters and stuff. And even law enforcement was like, well, like, maybe he, like, fell into the creek and floated away or floated back.
I feel like I'm out of my element. Like, clearly this is not my expertise. I've never conducted a search. I've never found anyone.
Right.
But I understand the family's frustration, because if I went there, like, again, like you said, steps away from where this thing happened, and I find my son, and you said you looked here, I'm not any less angry. Even if there is some explanation, which I do not understand, which I hope was explained to the family, but it sounds like maybe it wasn't because they're still upset. I get why they're upset.
100%. And obviously an autopsy is performed, and the ME can't really determine a clear cause of death. There's no, penetrating injuries based on not only the body, but he was also completely closed. So, like, there's no, like, rips or tears indicating
so
stabbing.
Crazy.
There's no bone fractures. There's no evidence of drowning. There's no water in his lungs or airways. There's no evidence of a gunshot wound. Like, obviously, strangulation is still a possibility.
Well, yeah, but is his hyoid bone intact?
Well, and that's the thing. Like, the ME said that there were no broken bones, so I would assume that would be included
in that. Yeah.
Yeah, but the decomposition of his body is severe enough to not really be able to determine if there was, like, bruise marks on his neck or anything like that.
That makes sense.
But, I mean, here's the thing. Like you said, supposedly law enforcement was crawling all over this place. And even the divers said, like, if he was here, the water wasn't even that deep when we searched it. Like, we would have found him very, very quickly if he was here.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, his personal effects are completely intact. He had papers and, like, paper dollars in his wallet. They weren't, moldy. They didn't even look, like, waterlogged. And even the people who found him said that his body wasn't bloated like he had been in the water for almost 30 days at that point. So
then we have to kind of assume that he was kept somewhere else, which would make sense. Like, if law enforcement did the search that they said, if someone knew, okay, they're going to be coming in and searching, so let's make sure there's nothing for them to find. And what we've seen, I mean, this is not the first time I've seen this, where a body is found in an exact place someone has searched because the perpetrator knows, like, hey, they kind of already, like, checked this area off the map. So if I put a body here, it's unlikely to be found. Or if it is found, it's probably going to be a long time. But they weren't counting on the family being so relentless.
Right. And I brought up that he was one of the only people of color at the party because there have been some rumors that maybe a white girl at the party had flirted with Alonzo and he flirted back. And some of the guys at the party, didn't like that, took him out, jumped him, and actually killed him. And a lot of members of the Brooks family believe that Alonzo was the victim of a hate crime. And even some of them have stated that while at the party, he had been, called derogatory terms and had even been told, quote, he wouldn't make it out alive. End quote.
Which, again, maybe this was hard for people to believe a few years ago, but in the climate that we're living in now, to me, this isn't hard to believe at all. I mean,
exactly.
Literally here in our own state in Bloomington, I don't know if you have read about this, Britt, but
I have.
Yeah, there was a group of white guys who got into it with a person of color, and they tried to lynch this person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like in 2020. So we can't act like this stuff doesn't happen. Like people don't get mad and stupid and racist and mean.
And that it didn't happen 16 years ago. You know, if it's happening today, we have to believe and have to know that it was happening 16 years ago, 25 years ago, 40 years ago, 400 years ago. As of March 2019, his case was officially closed by the Kansas Bureau of Investigation with a statement that there was no evidence that Alonzo was a victim of a crime, and there was no reason to continue the investigation.
Which is bananas because, like, if you're saying he's not a victim of a crime, then you need to have, like, a logical explanation for how he died. Then tell me. Tell me how he died. Tell me how he wound up there. If there was no foul play, it's not fair to just say, nah, we don't think so. We're going to close it because we just have this, like, feeling.
Right. And as far as I could see, his death certificate still says his cause and manner of death are both undetermined. So if they're undetermined, you can't rule anything out, you know? But the thing is, the FBI is currently offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone involved with Alonzo's death and have officially, federally reopened it.
Thank God.
Yeah, so anyone with information is encouraged to call the FBI at 816-512-8200 or 816-474-TIPS, or to even submit online at fbi.tips.gov. And the family also has a Facebook group, Justice for Alonzo Brooks. And there's actually an independent filmmaker working with the family on a documentary just about Alonzo called The Mysterious Death of Alonzo Brooks. And I will link to both of those in our show notes. Okay, Ashley, you gave me one of the UFO ones, and you know that is, like, not my jam.
Yeah, I'm all about it, though.
Yeah. So I watched it. I watched it a couple times. It's interesting, but I'm just like such a skeptic about these things.
Wait, you don't think it's real?
Side-eye about it. I don't know. So this is going to be quick because, again, like, I'm not a huge fan or even, like, convinced about a lot of things when it comes to UFOs.
I didn't realize you were not a believer.
I mean, I will say, like, in the past couple of months, I've become more accepting of the theories. So this happened back on September 1st, 1969 in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And, like, not just in one area, like across the entire county, multiple people had potential interactions with UFOs. The episode goes through, like, a handful of people. By a handful, I mean, like, a lot that I, like, had to race to write down. You know, some of them are driving and there's, like, a huge flash of light and then it's gone. One was, like, a kid who was at a neighbor's house and felt like he needed to go home, and he started running home, and the neighbor, like, observed him running in place and then disappearing. The kid remembers being on a ship with another person from the community. The other person remembers being on the ship, but doesn't remember seeing this other kid. I don't know.
Well, what I thought was so interesting is, of these accounts, it seems like a lot of them involved kids. Because if I'm remembering correctly, and granted, I didn't take notes because this was one of yours, but I watched it twice. If I'm remembering correctly, they mentioned something about kids, like multiple kids being on the ship. And I know that some adults had some kind of interactions or at least saw something, but it seemed like it was whatever had happened was very focused on kids. And, like, if you could bend your mind for a minute and pretend you think aliens are real, like, what is it about kids that they're, like, going for? Is it just that they know something about our culture and, like, we wouldn't believe them?
I mean, that's kind of, like, my only explanation is, like,
or, like, maybe they know that their minds are more malleable at that age and, like, that's what they want.
That's like, yeah, like, maybe they're more receptive, on top of the fact that, like, if they were to experience this and tell someone, who would believe them?
What are your thoughts on... So, again, I want to believe it's real. I kind of believe it's real. What are your thoughts on it being the whole town in on a conspiracy theory? Because one of the things that to me is bananas is that, like, everyone in 69 just kind of assumed no one would believe them. So no one talked about it. The newspapers didn't even report on it. It's literally like it never happened. And then, like, could a small town get together and fake something like this.
Well, here's the thing. It's actually been like acknowledged as a historical event in this city since. And one of the boys who is said to have experienced this phenomenon, like even raised money with other people in the area to erect a monument commemorating the event.
Mm-hmm.
It's since been torn down, and he's like petitioning the city to like re-erect it. But it's still technically on the books as like something that happened in this city as of right now. Now, whether or not the people who lived in this town, and like I say city, when they talked about it, it reminded me of the town that I grew up in, which was tiny. Like everyone knew everybody.
That's what I'm saying. It reminded me of like a little Stephen King town.
Exactly. And like one person even said like, if you usually got roast beef and got a chicken sandwich the next day, like people would talk about it. Like it was very, very small and everyone was connected. I don't know. It's just again, like I'm such a skeptic. I was probably not the right person to like recap this episode because I'm just like very, very side-eye about it.
I'm so on board. Like I either need a big conspiracy and this whole tiny town is in on it to like make their town some kind of like tourist stop or whatever. But honestly, what I really want to be real is I want this to be real. And I'm so down to believe they got abducted. I'm unwilling to believe that we are the only life form out there. We had earlier this year, we already talked about it. Like the government was like, hey, yeah, lots of UFOs we see all the time.
I was gonna say the only reason I'm giving this like 14 grains of salt instead of 1 is because of what like the Department of Defense put out with videos.
I can't believe you trust them of all people. And like they are the biggest liars.
I know, but like this was a reenactment and that was supposed footage. Like I will give them like, and like maybe it was just a distraction from coronavirus. I don't know. But like someone higher up than a couple of people in Massachusetts said this happened. And I don't know. It's just a little bit more confirmation that like it could be possible. I'm not saying it's real because, again, huge skeptic over here, but
aliens,
it might not be fake.
Aliens are totally real. We can move on to the next one. They're real.
Okay, so the last episode that Netflix released is the disappearance of Lena Chapin.
This one was crazy.
Yeah, so it kind of starts out with, you know, her sister stopping by Lena and her boyfriend's house, asking where Lena is, and her boyfriend's like, oh, like she ran off with someone else and they're in Florida now. And her sister's like, okay, but her son's here. That's weird. All of her stuff is here. All of her pictures, but she was like a huge like picture person. All of that's still here. And she felt immediately not okay because not only was her son still left there, but her son was actually with their mother, Sandy. And at that point, like everyone was sketchy of Sandy. And they were sketchy of Sandy because Lena was not the first person to just up and leave or disappear from Sandy's life. Sandy had a husband who disappeared when the girls were younger. And Gary was actually the brother of Sandy's second husband, Albert.
Yeah, it was so funny at the beginning of the series when her daughter was explaining, you know, she liked to go for men. I can't remember what the first thing she said, or the ones that have brothers. And I was like, that's oddly specific. And then we learned why.
She was like, and then she married a brother. And then his brother.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and, you know, Albert was like this really laid-back dad.
So laid back, in fact, that he couldn't even put away his boob for the interview with Unsolved Mysteries.
I'm sorry. I love Albert.
I loved him, too. He seemed like the sweetest. The girls loved him, but like...
He like reminded me of my papa. Like
I would be lying if I said to you that the entire time I was like, God, Albert, just button your shirt.
So Sandy leaves Albert for his brother, Gary. And Gary is a different kind of stepdad. He's kind of more of a drill sergeant. He's more structured. He probably buttoned his shirt. I don't know.
Oh,
we don't know.
Gary probably buttoned his shirts.
But he like had the girls on like chore schedules and made sure that they were like, you know, kind of progressively like improving their life through like different experiences, if you will. And he would also be kind to them in the way that, like, if you complete your chores, we can go get ice cream. Like, there is, like, a reward for your hard work. And I appreciate that, honestly. seems pretty legit.
Mm-hmm.
But less than 3 years after Sandy married Gary, she starts having an affair with this other guy, Chris. He's younger than both Sandy and Gary. He's more well off, and Gary's really hurt by this affair. And on top of that, he finds out that Sandy was actually passing bad checks under his name. Not cool. But then Gary goes missing. And he was reported on May 13th, 1999, that he had been missing for a couple of days. And, law enforcement comes out, they check his place, and Sandy and Lena actually show up at that time. And, law enforcement is like, hey, this is what we're here for. And Lena was like, oh, yeah, I should probably have reported him missing. They search the entire house, find zero evidence of Gary even having ever been there.
Yeah, he's been wiped from his own property, basically.
Yeah, there's none of his stuff, none of his clothes, nothing. But there is a checkbook that belongs to this Chris guy. And he actually moved into the house days later. And law enforcement, asked Sandy to take a polygraph. And she's like, you know what? If you find a body, I'll take one.
That was the thing that stood out to me the most. And of course,
that means there's a body to find.
Exactly. But of course, what we end up learning later in the series or in this episode is she can only be that bold and brazen because she knows there will never be anything found.
What is happening? Exactly. And, the police interview the kids, and everyone is just kind of I don't know, except for Lena. She gets really defensive. And, she even told her sisters, not to talk about things, not to say anything. But one of her sisters, Brandy, remembers that when they got home from school that day that Gary first went missing, their mom was like, hey, I think the cat had kittens out in the field. Why don't you go look for them?
Mm-hmm.
And they all go out. And she was finally like, I have chores to do. I have to get stuff for my chores. She goes in the house and she finds her mom scrubbing what looks like diluted bleach off the floor. And her mom's like, get out, get out, get out. And that's it. But Lena actually told Albert, 3-button Albert, that her mom had killed Gary. She had used hay strings, which I would consider a twine, to tie him up in the bedroom. And not only that together, she and her mom had burned Gary's body.
Mm-hmm.
And she even says on the recording of the conversation, what was I supposed to do? And Albert was like, no, I get it. You were just a kid.
I know, freaking Albert. He's so sweet.
You're taught at a young age to listen to your parents. And that's what you were doing. It's not...
Well, and Albert, I
your
think
fault.
Albert has to realize what a scary person that her mother is.
100%.
And who knows? I mean, again, as the series goes on, we learn that this woman would honestly have no qualms with taking out one of her kids if she felt like they were getting in the way. So, I mean, I think it's Gary's brother who, betrayed him slightly. But I love the compassion that he shows for her in that moment when he's just listen, you had no choice. I understand.
Right. And Lena was only, 13 when Gary went missing. And immediately after, Sandy lawyers up and actually gets Lena to retract her statement. But, she eventually tells her sister Brandy everything about how Sandy killed Gary. And Brandy even brought it up to Sandy and was like, hey, what's going on? And Sandy and Chris, her new husband, take Brandy out in the middle of the field and threaten her life because of, what she quote unquote claims to know about this.
For me, this was one of the most gut-wrenching points in any of the episodes that I saw, when Brandy is literally talking about how her mother, her own mother, who she earlier told stories about her putting her to bed every night and being there every day, is driving her out to a field where presumably her boyfriend is going to shoot her daughter. I mean, and when she talks about getting in the car and just the only thing I could think to do was just to hold on to her because he can't kill us
because
both.
Being close to her was the only thing that would save my life. And it wasn't immediate. She even says I clung to my mother for minutes.
I have no
before she said, don't shoot her.
I have no idea how Brandy went on. Because again, they go home together. And she knows from then on her mom is willing to kill her. How do you not walk on eggshells? How do you live in that environment and grow up normal whatever normal is. I just wanted to like reach out and hug Brandy. I physically like cannot even comprehend what that has to do to a person.
As if that wasn't like as jarring and as evident as we could find for the potential guilt of Sandy. At one point in time, another one of Lena's sisters, Robin, was posting missing persons flyers around town.
Yes.
And it was later found out that Sandy, their mother, was paying a younger sister like it was $5 a poster
$5
to take them down.
I couldn't.
Like, what kind of mother?
What's so interesting is I felt like I knew nothing about this case coming in, but something about that resonated with me. So I don't know if I heard that in another story or if I had heard this story in passing at another time, but I think that is so bananas and so outlandish. Like, also, if she's missing and you did something, if you got rid of her in a way...
Wouldn't you want to just keep the missing posters out there so people are looking for, quote-unquote, her when you know where she is already?
And even if she doesn't know where she is, like, it's just a bad look all around. Like, what does the missing persons posters have to do? The only way a missing person poster works is if the person is actually walking around and someone's going to spot them. If that's not the case with Lena...
Why? What's the point of taking them down?
Other than a power move, right?
Right. So there was eventually a civil suit heard in the wrongful death of Gary against Sandy and Chris. But the taped confession that Lena gave wasn't admissible at all. And the sisters, as well as law enforcement, truly believed that Lena was aware of what happened to Gary and had maybe even helped Sandy. And Lena would not only put her mother in prison for the murder, but Sandy was also obsessed with Lena's son, Coulter. And once Lena was missing, she petitioned the courts to grant custody of Coulter to herself because Lena had abandoned him. And the courts were like, well, she's not here to defend herself, so sounds about right.
Which is so bananas.
I mean, it is. As someone who has worked in and around family law, it's not crazy. But in this case, it seems completely outlandish. Sandy and Chris were found guilty of wrongful death in civil court and ordered to pay $7 million to Gary's daughters. But there have never been any charges in the disappearance of Lena. And based on the documentary, Lena's sisters seem to be completely estranged from their mother and continue to seek answers and justice or anything on the disappearance of their sister. And they've even conducted searches on the property where Sandy and Chris lived when Lena went missing, but they've never found anything, even using like ground penetrating radar, with zero luck. Sandy and Chris have divorced back in 2014, and she's remarried now, but she still has custody of Coulter, Lena's son. And from what I could tell researching, there are no updates on Lena's disappearance or whereabouts.
Yeah, this is one of those crazy cases that I think that I pray that Unsolved Mysteries brings a ton of attention to, because I just can't believe that the case stands where it does. It seems like there's so much. It seems like it's so clear. It's one of those cases where like we have a recording of somebody who's saying exactly what happened, but like because of, legal loopholes, we're not allowed to use it. It's just all so unfortunate. And I hope that this case really does get the attention it deserves, because I don't think I had any clue about this case before Unsolved Mysteries. Right. And hopefully this puts a little bit of pressure on to get things moving in the case again, because they ended on such a strong note. I feel like they really bookended this series with two cases that were just so unbelievable.
Definitely.
And I'm really excited to see, there were supposed to be 12 episodes, and what I heard is they broke it into 2 segments. So we should be getting episodes 7 through 12 someday, TBD.
And something that was at the end of every episode, which I'm sure you noticed, Ashley, was if anyone has any information on any of these cases, they usually post something specific to the case, but you can also go to unsolved.com and submit your information there.
And hopefully we'll be back with more review stuff, if you guys like it, when the next episodes drop. And we'll see you then. Crime Junkie is an Audio Chuck production. So what do you think, Chuck? Do you approve?
Oh, you guys, podcasters' worst nightmare. We just recorded one of our longest episodes ever. It's like 2 hours of our recap of the second half of Unsolved Mysteries. And I found out that my audio was totally wonky. I have no idea what happened. The ghosts, the tsunami ghosts that Britt talks about in this episode might have taken over my computer. I feel terrible. We're trying to make it the best we can. I was going to re-record. I polled the fan club and said, listen, do you guys want the content now as is? It is not up to my standards, and I'm so sorry. Or do you want to wait a couple of weeks and we can re-record? And the majority of you were so sweet, so kind, and said, no, we don't want to make you do additional hours of work. We just want the content. We just want to hear you and Britt. I love you guys for that. Thank you for being so supportive. We have tried to clean it up the best we can so it's still listenable. I promise I will triple, double, quadruple check my audio in the future. Thank you for being understanding. This is just an extra. It's not your full-length episode that you guys pay for. So I hope you like the extra content. We're a little delayed in Unsolved Mysteries, but thank you for being gracious. Thank you for being kind and sticking with us and supporting us. And I will keep bringing you extra content, and I will keep making sure that it's actually recorded properly because that's my full-time job. Thank you guys. Hi, Crime Junkies. I'm Ashley Flowers.
And I'm Britt.
And this is super delayed, but we've been very
we
busy.
were making new episodes for every other week, right?
Yes. Yeah. Constantly making new content. But that doesn't mean we don't want to give you what you asked for. Even though it came out a while ago, we're back with the second installment of Unsolved Mysteries. And honestly, I needed a minute to break these down because the ones that I have, I don't know about, we always split them in half. The ones that I have, I swear, Netflix didn't even cover half of the actual stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So let's dive in and break down the last 6 episodes of the new installment of Unsolved Mysteries. All right, Britt, so let's dive in. The first episode was about John Wheeler, who everyone called Jack. This dude was super smart. We're talking all of the Ivy League schools. He actually helped set up the Vietnam Memorial, and he worked really high up in government. For the Bush administration, dude was connected. And in 2010, when the story takes place, he was actually working in intelligence and national security for this private firm, quote unquote part-time, but anyone who knows a guy like that knows there is no such thing as part-time.
Right, like you.
Yeah, there's no such thing. I'll never be part-time. So Christmas rolls around and it's a normal Christmas. Everyone says he's happy, the family has a great time together. They all come together, even though he travels a lot for work. Now, he was supposed to spend the few days after Christmas with his family. His wife said this was our time to really see each other. We catch up on all the movies we haven't watched all year. This was our time. But a couple days after Christmas, he tells his wife, I have to go into work. Something really important is what he said. It's all he would say to her. And he says that, for a couple of days, he's going to actually stay in downtown, Washington, D.C. But the thing is, he doesn't quite do what he says he's going to do. And no one can really piece together why he makes the decisions he does or where exactly he goes after this. So on December 28th, he takes the Amtrak to Washington. The whole time he's emailing from his phone. In the Netflix documentary, they're the guy was glued to it. It's so easy to track him.
He's working the entire time and we can see that.
Right. And a lot of the emails he was sending was actually to his wife because they were fighting. This got left out of the Netflix documentary, but I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think she did something to him, which might be why they left it out. But they were fighting about him leaving their family time and going into work.
Yeah, he like completely interrupted their like staycation.
Right. So he's like emailing her to try and make up for all of this or whatever, try and make things better, smooth things over. So we know he makes it to DC, but the thing is, instead of staying downtown like he said he was going to, we know that by 7:30, he is actually in Delaware, where they have a second home. So his wife's in New York. That's where they spent Christmas. He goes to DC for work, and then he goes back to Delaware at their second home. But his wife had no idea that that was the plan. Now, the Washington Post says that he makes some calls to a cab company in Wilmington, which is like near the town where he lived. But like, there's not a lot of details around, why he's in Wilmington, when he goes to Wilmington, if he ended up getting a cab. Like, this is the fuzzy pieces that are hard for me to put together. But what we do know is at 11:30 p.m. that night, the house across the street from Jack's, this was like in construction, just being put up, someone sets a smoke bomb off. If you read news articles, there's even talk of someone saying that potentially they were actually trying to set it on fire. But everything in Netflix and a couple of other places says at least it's like smoke bombs. No one knows that night where Jack is, but he's not like reported missing. His wife can't really get a hold of him, but nothing concerning at this point. But it's just interesting to make note that I think in the documentary, they make it seem like he was for sure at his Delaware home across the street from this, but we don't actually know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, so this is the 29th, at 8:45 in the morning, he gets a cab to Wilmington, Delaware, and he asked the cabbie to stay at this place called Hotel DuPont, or take him to Hotel DuPont. But he wasn't planning on staying there. It sounded kind of like maybe he was going to meet someone there, but no one really knows why. Again, this was another thing that was like left out of the documentary, was this like early morning trip. Now, at 9:30, we know he emails his work. And it's interesting because he doesn't have his phone at this point. If he took the cab to Wilmington, I don't know if he's making this email from Wilmington. Again, the Netflix documentary made it seem like he was doing it from his home, but everything that I found, we don't actually know where he's sending these emails from. But the emails are to his private company that he works for, saying that he had a home break-in the night before, lost his cell phone, lost his security badge that like gets him in and out of work, lost his key fob, and lost his briefcase. But interestingly, what they do make note of in the documentary is that he doesn't like tell police there's a break-in. He doesn't report anything missing, and he doesn't even mention it to his wife.
Which is super weird.
Now, something I found in my research is that apparently he also emailed his therapist saying that he felt, quote, dazed, boxed in a corner, end quote, after his fight with his wife. Now, there are fewer emails this day, and that's because we find out later that he doesn't have his cell phone with him. The cell phone is actually found at the house where the smoke bombs went off. Now, again, they like aren't connecting all these pieces like at the time, but when people go to the house, like make sure everything's clear, nothing's on fire, the house is okay, they find this cell phone sitting right outside, and we learn later that that's Jack's cell phone. So that's why he doesn't have it.
So, as you know, I have a million questions, but do we think that he was maybe lying about the break-in because he had lost his phone at some point?
Maybe. So I think everyone wants to say yes, like he knew he left his phone if he was the one that did the smoke bombs, which even his wife, like a lot of people think that it was him. Once he realized he lost his phone, he was like staging this whole thing. The problem is, if you watched the documentary, none of that stuff ends up getting found. It's not in his house. It's not in any of his houses. It's not in his car.
So he said he'd lost his briefcase, security badge, key fob, and phone. The phone is found across the street, but none of the other items are found at all.
Yeah. And he has, like, again, a really high up job in security. And his firm works with, like, the DOJ, National Defense. Like,
these are important things to have not only on your person, but, like, make sure they don't get into anybody else's hands.
Yeah. So we don't know a lot about what else happens that day. Again, we don't have him with his phone to track him. But we do know that by 6 p.m., he walks into this local pharmacy by his home. Now, they don't say if he walks there, did he get a cab? I don't know that we actually know, but he walks in and talks to the pharmacist, who is like the guy who normally fills his prescription. So they're like acquaintances. And he asks him, can you give me a ride to Wilmington? So he wants to go back to Wilmington, where we didn't know in the documentary, but if you research outside of this, we know he was that morning. Now, the pharmacist is obviously like, I can't, dude. Like, I'm in the middle of working.
Literally at work, yeah.
Right. But he offers to give him money for a cab. And he says, no, I don't need money. Like, I have my own money.
So then why ask the pharmacist for a ride?
That's a great question. Now, the documentary on Netflix says that he did find someone in the pharmacy to give him a ride. And they actually show some security footage of him like walking out with what looks like a younger man. I searched high and low.
Of course you did.
To figure out who he left with, because I think that person holds so much of the answers, right? Because the thing about this case that everyone points out is even at the pharmacy, even though like, you know, he's missing his phone, some weird stuff's going on. When he's at the pharmacy, he's walking normal. The guy he talks to says he's talking normal. He's coherent.
There's no like erratic behavior or anything that would cause anybody any sort of concern.
Yeah. But then 40 minutes later, after he's done with this ride with this stranger, he shows up in a parking garage on their surveillance footage, like completely disheveled. He's holding one of his shoes. He has no winter coat, which he didn't have before, but it's like freezing and snowing outside.
And he's not wearing one of his shoes.
Yeah, holding one of his shoes. And what I read is that one of the shoes is like broken. So what on earth happened in that 40 minutes?
Between point A and point B, right?
Yes. So he's like going around in the parking garage looking for his car is what it is that he needed to get, right? And the attendants are asking him like, well, where's your parking ticket? Because he couldn't find his car. And that's when he tells the attendant, well, my briefcase was stolen. It's in there. And what it turns out is his car isn't even in the parking garage at all. It's like in a completely different one.
So he's just like mixed up.
Yeah, but it's worth noting, though, because at first I heard that and I'm like, oh, this is like super bizarre. But everyone on the documentary, like everyone in his family, said that it was actually super normal for this to happen. He was terrible with directions, and he was actually known for like going to work in his car and coming home in a cab because he forgot where he parked. So
I feel like that's very me. So I'm like sympathizing.
Yeah. So even though it's weird that, you know, the shoe stuff's going on and, you know, he doesn't have his coat.
But the actual interaction and situation of like him being in like the completely different garage is not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah. I don't think that necessarily is a sign that he like had some kind of mental break. But it is worth noting that something they talk about over and over in the documentary is that Jack was diagnosed as bipolar. He'd been on medication for a long time. Usually, his wife said he was pretty good about taking his medication. When she saw him, she didn't feel like he was on, you know, the brink of anything. But it's worth noting, right? Because even though nothing happened in front of her, what everyone wonders is, did he have some kind of episode that led to this strange behavior? Because from the parking garage, his behavior gets even weirder.
Well, and you kind of wonder, like, I never ever want to blame a victim's family, obviously, but like, could the stress of like him having to go into work and upsetting his wife trigger something?
No, and I don't think that's blaming them, but I think that's just how we all react to different stressors.
Yeah, like he had that, like we know that he's coming off this really relaxing like holiday, and then this surprise work thing possibly happened, and he has to disrupt that, and it's a change of his routine, it's a change of his plans. He's upset his wife now. I mean, like you said, he even reached out to his therapist, so we know his emotions are in a heightened place, you know?
Right. So I think it's totally possible that he was in some kind of state, but if it was as simple as that, this wouldn't be an Unsolved Mysteries episode.
Right.
So from the parking garage, he disappears for a little bit, and then he reappears in this building in downtown Wilmington, where he was trying to go. So he got there somehow. And on Netflix, they think that maybe they found a guy who gave him, or like a cab driver who gave him a ride. Like I think they said in the documentary, he like heard that someone else was going there and he like jumped in the car with them, which when I first heard that, to me was like, again, thinking maybe he's like in some kind of episode. I was like, oh, maybe he just heard someone was going anywhere and went there.
And was like, I'm going to go. Yeah.
No, but no, yeah, knowing he was there earlier in the day makes it seem even more deliberate. Like it wasn't just, I'm going to get in a car and go anywhere that isn't here. He wanted to go there.
Go back almost.
Right. So he goes to this downtown building, and in the Netflix documentary, they tell you he kind of like roams around. He probably slept in there. But there's more information in the Washington Post. Apparently he's asking people how to get to Philly or ways he can get to Philly. He tries to speak to a managing partner at a law firm, but before they can actually like get him in with the guy, he just like leaves. And then he's requesting train fare from people, but we know he has money.
Or at least had money because he told the pharmacist.
Well, and here's the thing. He ends up being found later with his money. So I know he still had his money. So he spends like literally overnight in this building, in like the basement tunnels of this building. At some point, he trades his suit jacket for a black hoodie, it looks like, on camera. I don't know where he got it. Don't know where his suit jacket went. Don't know if that ever got answered. And at some point the next day, he leaves. We see him, quote, walking east toward historic Rodney Square, which as I kept researching, I found out it actually was like a really dangerous small city, like a dangerous area. Mm-hmm. So he's like walking in that direction, and then we just never see him again. And the next thing we know, a day later, so this is like the 30th that he walks away, the 31st, he shows up in a landfill in the same clothes we last saw him on. The problem is he is like beaten up, like beaten to death. Not just like had a heart attack and died there, but though he did have a heart attack on his autopsy as well, but I think probably as a result of the beating that he took. Mm-hmm. He had like broken ribs, his face was destroyed. The thing about this is, you know, when people first saw this, they're like, oh, this is some kind of mob hit. This is connected to his work or something like that. But they couldn't find any connections. Then they were like, oh, this is a mugging gone bad. He had an episode. He ended up somewhere bad. And someone took advantage of that. Problem is, this is where he said they find his money on him. He was wearing a Rolex and his West Point class ring.
Like there's no motive for a mobbing or a robbing if he has all this stuff still on him.
It does not make sense. And when they look at his body, they rule it a homicide by blunt force trauma. And of course, you know, a lot of people are asking, well, you know, if he's in the landfill, maybe he was in, you know, the truck from the dumpster and he could have gotten all these bruises that way.
Which was my initial thought. Like maybe it's just like, you know, he was in the dumpster and got put into a compactor or something and then went to the landfill. Like maybe these are posthumous, but
no.
Ruling it as a homicide means that they aren't.
Right. Everyone like concludes it's not even like this is something that people argue about, right? Like I think we've seen that in cases before where you got one side saying one thing, one side saying another, multiple autopsies. Mm-hmm. Everyone's on the same page. Everyone says there is no way he could have gotten his injuries from being either in the dumpster or in the truck or dropped in the landfill. He was dead and then dropped in the landfill. So who would have wanted to kill him? How does that line up with the psychotic episode he had? Or maybe he didn't have one at all. Why didn't they take the stuff that was on him? There's so many questions, and they actually tracked down the dumpster that he was like found in. I mean, it was a miracle how they did it. Like they were swabbing all these dumpsters for DNA. They tracked the truck and they found the one that he was in. And you know, it sits super low. Like he could have crawled in himself if he wanted to, but no one can figure out why he would have wanted to. So did someone put him in there?
Right. And with his injuries, like, was he unconscious and someone thought that he was dead or close to death and dumped him there? Or like you said, like, did he crawl in there by himself? It's so
strange.
Yeah.
Now, it gets stranger because when they find his body, police learn who he is. And of course, they call the police where he lives in Delaware to say, hey, you know, we have a homicide and you know, they live in your town. And they say, super strange that you're calling us. We are going to that guy's house right now because someone reported a burglary. So meanwhile, like in his home, now mind you, this is the home that's across the street from the one that got smoke bombed.
The second home in Delaware.
Yeah. So his neighbor had like come over, and this is when, you know, Jack's like roaming around. So this is all happening kind of at the same time. Neighbor walks by and sees that his window's open and they're all like friendly. So he wants to like go in and let him know. Well, his back door is kind of like ajar. And when he walks into the kitchen, there's stuff everywhere. There's like broken stuff in the sink. There's spices everywhere. There's Comet all over the floor, his West Point sword. There's footprints all in the Comet. And so this guy reports that something must be going on. It's Jack